Number: the HOA Karen who picked the wrong rancher. Red and blue lights exploded across my ranch like the 4th of July, painting my peaceful evening in colors that meant someone's world was about to end. 3 squad cars rolled down my gravel drive that Saturday night, engines rumbling like thunder, their presence screaming that justice had finally come calling. I set my whiskey down on the porch rail and stepped into the spotlight, my cowboy boots hitting stone with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you're holding all the aces in a game the other player doesn't even realize they're losing. The lead officer walked toward me with his hand hovering near his service weapon. Not threatening exactly, but making it crystal clear that this wasn't a social call. And when he opened his mouth to speak, I knew the next few minutes would be more satisfying than Christmas morning and my wedding day combined. My name is Jake Sullivan, and I'm what you might call an old-fashioned American success story, wrapped up in a 53-year-old body that's seen its share of hard work and harder choices. I stand 6'2" in my boots, with hands that know the weight of honest labor and eyes that have watched this great country change in ways both beautiful and terrifying over the past 5 decades. I moved to this corner of Montana 6 months ago, seeking the kind of peace that only comes with wide-open skies and the freedom to live life without some bureaucrat breathing down your neck every 5 minutes. What folks around here see is a simple rancher who keeps to himself, tends his cattle, and minds his own damn business like any decent American should. But what they don't know could fill a book thicker than the phone directory. The woman who's been making my life hell for the past 3 weeks is Rebecca Patterson, though everyone calls her Becky, a 56-year-old self-appointed neighborhood dictator who's turned being president of the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association into her personal kingdom of petty tyranny. Becky's got that particular brand of entitlement that comes from never being told no in her entire privileged life, wielding her clipboard like a scepter and her HOA rulebook like the Constitution itself, completely unaware that she's about to learn the hardest lesson of her miserable existence about what happens when you mess with the wrong American. What Becky doesn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine in her wildest power-drunk fantasies, is that this simple rancher she's been terrorizing has connections that run deeper than oil wells and authority that could crush her little empire faster than a tornado through a trailer park. And tonight, she's about to discover that sometimes karma doesn't just come knocking. It kicks down the door with a badge and handcuffs. "Sir, we received a 911 call about suspicious activity and possible armed trespassing on this property," the officer announced, his voice carrying that official weight that makes honest citizens nervous and guilty ones soil themselves. "We need to see some identification and get this situation sorted out immediately." I reached for my wallet slow and deliberate, keeping my movements crystal clear because I've been around long enough to know how these things can go sideways fast when tempers are running hot. "Officer, I'm Jake Sullivan, and this here's my ranch," I said, handing over my license with the kind of calm confidence that comes from being absolutely, unquestionably in the right. "Might I ask who called this in?" The officer flipped through his notepad, his frown deepening with every page. Caller identified herself as Rebecca Patterson, president of the Pine Ridge HOA. Claims there's an armed and dangerous squatter on this property who's been threatening violence against law-abiding citizens. The smile that spread across my face could have lit up Times Square because I knew exactly who Rebecca Patterson was. And more importantly, she had no earthly idea who I really was beneath this rancher facade. "Officer, I bought this spread 6 months ago. Cash on the barrel. And I've got every piece of paperwork to prove it," I said, my voice steady as granite. "And just so we're all on the same page here, this property sits a good 3/4 of a mile outside any HOA jurisdiction." What Becky had just done wasn't just harassment anymore. It was filing a false police report about an armed and dangerous situation that didn't exist, which meant she just handed me the legal ammunition to blow her pathetic little empire to smithereens and salt the earth where it used to stand. 3 weeks earlier, my peaceful Sunday morning got shattered by pounding on my front door that sounded like the damn FBI coming to arrest Al Capone himself. I opened up to find Rebecca Patterson standing there like some sort of suburban general, wearing a power suit that probably cost more than most folks make in a month. Clutching her clipboard like it was the 10 Commandments handed down from Mount Sinai, her blonde hair was shellacked into one of those helmets that could probably stop a bullet, and her makeup was applied with the precision of a NASCAR pit crew, the whole package screaming, "I haven't heard the word no," since the Carter administration. I'm Rebecca Patterson, president of the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association, she declared, before I could even say howdy. Her voice dripping with the kind of authority that people assume when they've never actually earned respect through anything more challenging than a PTA bake sale. We have serious violations to discuss, and I don't have all day. I leaned against my doorframe, genuinely puzzled by this bizarre intrusion into what had been a perfectly good morning. Violations, ma'am? I think there's been some kind of mistake here. This property isn't part of any HOA that I know of. Her eyes narrowed behind those designer glasses, like a hawk spotting a field mouse. That's where you're wrong, cowboy. She snapped with enough venom to kill a rattlesnake. The Pine Ridge HOA board voted unanimously to expand our authority to include all properties within a 2-mile radius of our community borders. You're now under our jurisdiction whether you like it or not. I felt my jaw tighten as I processed the sheer audacity of what this woman was claiming. That's not how any of this works, I said, fighting to keep my voice level. You can't just vote to take over properties that were never part of your development. She shoved a stack of papers at me like she was serving a federal warrant. These are your violation notices. Effective immediately. Your fence is painted the wrong color. Your cattle constitute unauthorized livestock. And that barn of yours is a complete eyesore that violates at least 6 different architectural standards. You have 15 days to comply or start paying fines of $1,000 per day per violation. I didn't take those papers. Instead, crossing my arms and giving her the kind of look that had made board members sweat through their suits. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you real politely to get off my property. You have absolutely no authority here. And if you don't leave voluntarily, we're going to have a problem. Her face turned redder than a stop sign, and I could practically see the steam coming out of her ears. You'll regret this, she hissed like a cornered viper. I have connections throughout this county. Important people who know how to deal with troublemakers like you. When I'm finished, you'll be begging to follow every single rule. After she stormed off my land like Sherman marching through Georgia, I did what any smart American does when dealing with a certified lunatic who thinks she runs the world. I called up the best security company in 3 states and had them install cameras everywhere. High-definition models that could read a license plate from half a mile away and record audio clear enough to use in court. My gut told me this was just the opening salvo in what was going to be a full-scale war, and I intended to document every single shot fired. The harassment campaign began the very next morning and escalated faster than gas prices during an oil crisis, with new attacks coming daily that were clearly designed by someone with way too much time and not nearly enough actual problems to worry about. Fake violation notices started appearing on my gate every morning like some sort of twisted newspaper delivery, each one more ridiculous than the last. Threatening fines for everything from unauthorized gravel texture to excessive American flag display. My mailbox got stuffed with official-looking letters printed on fancy letterhead, threatening legal action and thousands in fines for violations that existed only in Becky's deranged imagination. Then she really started showing her true colors. And that's when I knew she'd crossed the line from annoying neighbor into full-blown criminal territory that would give me everything I needed to destroy her completely. One Tuesday morning, I spotted her actually inside my property line with a professional camera, taking photographs of my cattle like she was documenting evidence for the International Criminal Court. Ma'am, you're trespassing on private property, I called out, making sure I was visible to every security camera I'd installed. You need to leave immediately before this becomes a serious legal problem. She wheeled around with a look of triumph that made my skin crawl like fire ants. These cattle aren't registered with the Pine Ridge Livestock Management Committee, she announced like she'd just uncovered the Watergate conspiracy. Each animal represents a $1,000 fine per day until you bring them into compliance with association standards. I felt my hands clench into fists as I fought every instinct to handle this the old-fashioned way. There is no livestock management committee with any authority over this property, I said through gritted teeth. You need to get off my land right now, or I'm calling the sheriff. She actually laughed, a sound like fingernails on a chalkboard mixed with pure evil. Go ahead and call Sheriff Morrison, she said with absolute confidence. He's my second cousin, and he knows exactly how to handle troublemakers who don't respect community standards. But I didn't call the sheriff. Not yet anyway. because I was playing a much bigger game than Becky could possibly understand with her tiny little mind. Instead, I kept documenting every single trespass, every bogus notice, every threatening phone call she made to my house at all hours of the day and night, building what would become the most devastating case of harassment and abuse of power this county had ever seen. What Rebecca Patterson didn't know, what she couldn't have guessed in a million years of power-drunk fantasies, was that I wasn't just some random rancher who'd moved to Montana to escape the rat race and raise cattle in peace. I was Jake Sullivan, Senior Vice President and founding partner of American Property Solutions, the largest property management and HOA services company west of the Mississippi River. A company that controlled over 300 homeowner associations across 12 states, including every single HOA contract in this entire county, every rule Pine Ridge HOA passed, every fine they levied. Every decision they made had to go through my company for legal approval and enforcement, which meant Rebecca Patterson had been harassing, threatening, and trespassing against the man who literally controlled her entire operation. She'd been picking a fight with her own boss's boss's boss, and she had absolutely no idea that every illegal action she'd taken over the past 3 weeks had been building toward her complete and total annihilation. The situation finally reached its breaking point when I refused to pay her imaginary fines for my perfectly legal cattle, a refusal that sent her into such a screaming rage that she made the single biggest mistake of her pathetic career as a wannabe dictator. That's when she picked up the phone and called 911 to report me as an armed and dangerous trespasser on my own property, filing a completely false emergency report that would finally give me all the legal ammunition I needed to end her reign of terror permanently. Now, standing in my own driveway with 3 officers who were starting to realize they'd been called out on a completely bogus emergency, I watched the lead officer's entire demeanor change as he ran my license through the system and discovered exactly who I really was. Mr. Sullivan, I sincerely apologize for this confusion, he said, his tone shifting from suspicious to respectful, faster than a politician changing positions before an election. You're obviously the legal owner of this property, but we need to have a very serious conversation with Miss Patterson about filing false reports. I nodded with the kind of calm authority that comes from knowing you're about to watch someone's world collapse in real time. Officer, I've got something that might help with your investigation, I said in my most professional voice. I've been documenting Mrs. Patterson's harassment campaign for the past 3 weeks. Security footage, trespassing incident, fake legal documents, threatening phone calls, the whole 9 yards. You interested in taking a look? 30 minutes later, all 3 officers were crowded around my dining room table, watching footage on my laptop with expressions that grew darker and more disgusted with every clip. Becky trespassing on my property multiple times. Becky leaving increasingly unhinged voicemails, threatening lawsuits she had no authority to file. Becky attempting to intimidate me with completely fabricated HOA rules that existed nowhere outside her delusional mind. Mr. Sullivan, would you like to press charges for harassment, criminal trespass, and filing a false emergency report? The lead officer asked, his pen hovering over his citation book like a sword waiting to fall. Let me make one phone call first, I replied, pulling out my phone with hands that were steady as bedrock despite the adrenaline pumping through my veins. I think there's a much bigger problem here that needs immediate attention from the right people. I dialed a number I could recite in my sleep. A number that would set in motion the complete and utter destruction of Rebecca Patterson's carefully constructed empire of petty tyranny. Linda, this is Jake Sullivan, I said when my regional director answered. I need you and Tom from legal to get out to my ranch right now. We've got a situation with one of our contracted HOA board presidents. Yes. Rebecca Patterson from Pine Ridge. She just filed a false police report claiming I'm an armed trespasser on my own property. And I think it's time we had a come-to-Jesus meeting about her fitness to serve in any capacity whatsoever. I could hear Linda's sharp intake of breath, because as my regional operations director, she understood immediately how catastrophic this situation was about to become for Becky and anyone else involved in this mess. We'll be there in 20 minutes. Mr. Sullivan, she said, her voice tight, with barely controlled fury. I am so sorry about this situation. And I promise you it will be resolved today in a way that ensures it never happens again. While we waited for my team to arrive, I showed the officers even more evidence that painted a crystal-clear picture of systematic harassment and abuse of power that went far beyond simple neighbor disputes. The fake legal documents with no authority behind them. The manufactured violations based on rules that didn't exist. The attempts to expand HOA jurisdiction far beyond any legal boundaries. All of it carefully documented and ready to be used as evidence in what was about to become the most satisfying takedown in corporate history. When Linda's car came roaring up my driveway, followed by Tom from our legal department, I felt a surge of anticipation because I knew they'd brought Becky with them. Having collected her from her house under the pretense of an emergency HOA board meeting that required her immediate attention, the look on Rebecca's face when she saw 3 police cars parked in my driveway was worth more than money could buy. A mixture of confusion and dawning terror that made every moment of harassment I'd endured completely worthwhile. But it got even better when she spotted me standing with the officers. Because that's when the first real flicker of fear crossed her features, and she started to understand that something had gone very wrong with her perfect little plan. "What in the hell is going on here?" she demanded. Though her voice was already shaking, despite her attempts to maintain that imperious tone she'd perfected over years of bullying people. "Why am I being dragged to this violator's property for a meeting?" Linda stepped forward with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold and professional and absolutely merciless. "Miss Patterson, are you aware that Mr. Sullivan is the senior vice president and founding partner of American Property Solutions?" I watched the color drain from Becky's face like someone had opened a valve. Her entire carefully constructed world shifting beneath her feet as the implications of Linda's words hit her like a freight train loaded with karma. "That's impossible," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the evening breeze. "He's just some nobody rancher who doesn't understand community standards. A rancher whose property sits outside any HOA jurisdiction," Tom added, his voice carrying the weight of legal authority that Becky had been pretending to wield for years. "Yet you've been systematically harassing him, trespassing on his property, creating fake legal documents. And now you filed a false emergency report claiming he's armed and dangerous. Do you have any comprehension of how serious this situation has become?" Becky tried desperately to recover, her voice shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. "I was just doing my job as HOA president," she protested weakly. "The board voted unanimously to expand our authority to include his property. I have all the documentation to prove everything I did was completely legitimate."